Welcome everyone to another episode of the Walkoff. It is sadly the final episode of the Walkoff for the MLB season. That doesn't mean that we won't be here in the future. We will still be here, just bringing off-season news, which might be a little bit slower, but still fun and still exciting to bring out. Um, so the World Series is over, as I mentioned about 2 seconds ago. We we only have 3 games to talk about. We talked about the first 2 games on our last episode. Game 3. We saw Max Scherzer started, but he exits after 3 innings. I know, Anthony, you and me were talking about it when the Rangers got Max Scherzer. I think they were expecting an ace out of him, and that's just not a pitcher that he is anymore.
Yeah, and it's part of the reason why I'm so surprised that the Rangers ended up finishing the deal and winning it all. The two guys who they thought they were going to be aces, Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, both of them really didn't do anything. And ironically, in the game where Max Scherzer looked pretty solid, he gets hurt. So if it's not one thing, it's the other with Max. And but yeah, the Rangers got it done. I know we'll go into more detail, but good for them, man. I'm happy for them. First World Series in their history, so it's been a long time waiting for them.
Yeah, and then we saw Brian Fadat on for the Diamondbacks, who pitched amazing in the NLCS out of nowhere. He had a 5 ERA in the regular season, above a 5 ERA in the regular season. Then he comes in to the World Series and the NL or more of the NLCS, and he looked amazing. Like, he looked lights out. But he went 5 1/3 and gave up 4 hits and 3 earned runs, which is like him a little bit more. That's more of what he did in the season, but still some really good stuff from him. The Rangers take this one 3-1. They go up in the series 2-1 after this one. And to say the least, not to be a spoiler or anything, but after this, it was kind of Texas all over the place.
Yeah, good, Justin.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like I know we said like on the last episode, I was expecting to see a little bit of a more balanced series between the two because you didn't really know what to expect. I mean, these were two teams that never really had too much postseason success, obviously. Obviously the Rangers never won a title up until now, but you just didn't know what to expect from either side. But as you mentioned, Vin, ever since that game 3 matchup and Texas going up 2-1 there, I mean, yeah, from that point on, it was just like you just knew what you were going to expect the rest of the way as Texas just completely they just turned up to another level. And I mean, that's the best way I could really put it.
Yeah, it seemed like after game 2, it looked like we were going to have a little bit more of a series because it was tied up at 1 apiece, and the Diamondbacks ran over the Rangers, but it didn't really go much farther than that. In game 4 of the World Series, we saw Andrew Heaney start for the Rangers. I talk about some weird names coming into pitch. I didn't even mention that John Gray came in for relief. I mean, looking at this pitching staff, looking at this pitching staff just a year ago. I mean, Max Scherzer is not on the team. There is no John Gray on this team. Uh, there is no Nathan Eovaldi. There is no Andrew Heaney. This entire team was built this year with free agents and a couple trades. It truly shows, the different ways baseball can be played, because most of Arizona is all draft picks, all born in the system and everything. And whereas the Rangers are more built from the system, built from the Major League Baseball system of free agency and trades. But yeah.
Yeah,
So
to me, the game. I know you guys mentioned like you thought that game 3 was kind of a game changer. I thought game 4, the decision by Lovello to go with the bullpen game, was not that they would have won the World Series necessarily, but if they didn't go that route, but I think it would have maybe went to game 6 or dare I say game 7. But I think that really was kind of the final nail in the coffin because they weren't competitive. I know the final score was like 11-7, so it doesn't look like a total blowout or anything. But if you look at the actual scoring, like when it happened, it was like 8-9 to nothing or whatever it was by the third inning. It was over, and you could just, if you were watching the game, you could feel there was no momentum on the Diamondback side. And I don't know who you would have started, but the Diamondbacks they didn't have a good enough bullpen to do that, and it kind of blew up in their face.
I I hate the bullpen games, especially in the postseason. I could understand them in the regular season. It's a longer season, But when you're in the postseason, every game is a must win. I mean, as a Phillies fan, I hate the bullpen games. But how can you have your starting pitcher, who may be a relief pitcher nonetheless, but Joe Mantiply, go 1 1/3? He gave up a hit and a run. In a game that you need to win, you're down in the series already 2-1, and you want to tie this thing up, and you go to a bullpen game. It's not watching the 2021 Rays anymore. You're not having the opener. It's a good idea, but it stops so quickly.
Like I can kind of see like a bullpen game kind of working out, for some teams, however. But if you're looking at Arizona in this case scenario, their bullpen is not as strong as other teams that were in the playoffs were. So, as you mentioned, like you're relying on Joe Mantiply, Miguel Castro. I mean, Paul Sewald coming in late games as well, who had a great postseason. I mean, don't get me wrong there. But as a whole, Arizona's bullpen has not been great between regular season and postseason. So, like in this case, being down 2-1, I did not like the fact that they went to a bullpen game, especially when you're trying to even things up. So, I mean that right there, I think basically just said it all for the rest of the series because it was really unfortunate to see that play out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we saw Arizona's Diamondback. We saw the Diamondbacks bullpen implode. It was not a very good game. Then we go to game 5, where Nathan Eovaldi does what he's done in what feels like every single postseason start, except for I think one against the Astros where he struggled a little bit. Or no, one earlier in game 1 where he struggled a little bit more against the Diamondbacks. But he comes back here. He goes 6 innings, 4 hits, no runs. He got into a bunch of jams this game, but he got out of every single one of them. And on the other side, Zach Gallen looked like he finally was clicking. He had a no-hitter going into the 6th. He pitched one more out, and he gave up 3 hits and a run in the World Series. And then the rest is history. You go into the 9th 1-0, and then Rangers tack on some more runs. It was capitalized by a Marcus Semien home run, and going into the bottom of the 9th, Diamondbacks really had no hope at home too, and Rangers win their first World Series in 51 years.
Yeah, good for them, man. I know how it feels to be an underdog. I know. I mean, we obviously the Mets don't have as much of a drought as the Rangers do, or the Rangers did. But for a fan base too, there was one video I saw, like there was an older man that was like crying. I think his like daughter filmed him crying, and he was sitting in his recliner. You didn't even know what to say, and that's always very heartwarming stuff because we watch this game in every sport we like day in and day out, for a lot of them. And the reason we do it is for moments like that. We hope to see our teams win, and a lot of the teams we root for don't win very often. So it's a really special moment, and kudos to Texas and specifically Arlington. I know Arlington's been big Rangers area. They get mad when they say Texas because obviously Houston Astros are there. But
Yeah.
it's a cool moment for that area, and you never know when you're going to see it again. So they should enjoy it.
And it's really good for baseball as well. You're not seeing the same teams over and over and over again either make it to the World Series or even win the World Series. Obviously in years past, it's been ran by the Houston Astros. The Dodgers would always be in the mix there as well. But now you're seeing a team like Texas, who, as you mentioned earlier, Vin, was a team that really was built around free agents and trade acquisitions throughout the season. But nonetheless, it just shows that like this is what a good front office and management does, to propel their team and get the pieces, to possibly go all the way. But, again, it's good for baseball to see a new team and a new face win it all because, maybe it'll elevate, from the viewer's point of view, more people will come in and watch maybe Texas, and other teams as well and really raise the ratings, for viewership. But yeah, just overall, I mean, I am happy for them. I'm obviously, I have my thoughts about some of the players on the Rangers team that I'm not a fan of, but as a whole, congratulations to them.
Yeah. I know you both have some thoughts on definitely two of the starting pitchers, which Anthony already mentioned earlier today. But you got to give it where credit's due. I mean, Corey Seager goes out there, he wins his second World Series MVP, and I mean, Anthony and I, we've talked about this basically the entire season. The 2020 World Series was a fluke. It was stupid and it was ridiculous. So Corey Seager, in my eyes, wins his first legitimate World Series MVP. But he is the first player since the great Reggie Jackson to win on two different teams. I was about to say two different leagues, but he never played for National League. So we have another great World Series. I mean, Justin, you mentioned it. The ratings were pretty low. It was, I heard, one of the lowest rated World Series ever. But I think that was also scheduling. You had game one on Monday night, and as much as people want to watch the World Series, you can imagine that the majority of them would rather watch a football game than watch the Rangers and the Diamondbacks play. It might be different. It was like the Rangers and the Phillies, or the Astros and the Phillies. I feel like the Diamondbacks really took the tone away, or if the Dodgers or Braves were in it. Which is sad because the Diamondbacks are a fun team to watch. And so are the Rangers, but they don't get the same love.
Yeah, and I think that's got a lot to do with star power. You have obviously some star power, like Corey Seager being the main guy. But you go through the rosters, and there's guys that started emerging as stars. Adolis Garcia, which was a shame that he got hurt and was taken off the World Series roster early. That's another thing. I thought when I saw all that happening, I was like, well, the Rangers are maybe down for the count, but they weren't. Adolis Garcia, like something that people aren't talking about. He was out of the World Series roster. I think it was after game 2 or 3. I forget exactly which game it was, but it was very early
I
in the
think he missed.
series. Huh?
No, I think he missed. Was it game 4 and 5? He missed.
I
He
think so.
missed, yeah. He missed 2 games. But when that happened, I was like, yeah, I was not that it was over, but I was like, oh, this could hurt them because he's been so clutch. But they didn't miss a step, and I think it's a combination of the Rangers playing really well and the Diamondbacks having some questionable managerial moves, as we mentioned, and also Diamondbacks just starting to kind of taper off. But yeah, I mean, I know the ratings went down and everything, but just as a baseball fan, it's still cool to see these. I like seeing the young stars out there. And who knows? Well, maybe we'll look back at this: Corbin Carroll, Evan Carter, their first World Series. It could be a really historical World Series 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, those are two stars in the making. We saw them really both shine. It was exciting to watch. But now that the World Series is over and it all comes to a close, we are sadly, finally in the off season, which can be a long, grueling process. As we all know, we have, oh my gosh, it was 147 days after the World Series ended. I forget how many days it is now, until the regular season starts again. But we have Gold Glovers winners coming out. Silver Sluggers are not out yet. Awards are not out yet. So it's an exciting period right now. And we have a lot of managerial news to talk about, which, I mean, the last one that just happened, a couple hours ago, I was not expecting whatsoever. Especially for, those two teams that were involved. But let's first go over the Gold Gloves. I mean, we saw 3 Rangers win Gold Gloves. We saw Adolis Garcia for the AL, Nathan Lau, Jonah Heim win for their positions. A bunch of other positions. We saw Stephen Kwan and Andres Jimenez, 2 players that have won it now back-to-back years, which is exciting. And to say that they're both on the exact same team is exciting for the future of the Cleveland Guardians. But yeah, is there anyone on the AL side that kind of surprised you or stood out a little bit for you? I have someone, but I don't know if everyone agrees.
Well, I don't know if you could go first, Justin, if you want.
Like just looking at the list here, I feel like, gosh, honestly, I have to probably go with Anthony Volpe for a shortstop because, I mean, he had a great year, obviously with the glove. I mean, you can't take that away, but obviously, like when he first started out, when he first made the team, and I'd say like maybe the first 20 to 25 games, you would see him make a little bit of mistakes out there, whether it was, the ball hitting the back of the glove or maybe just making the wrong plays on the field, which I mean, it didn't cost them that much. But if I'm looking at a shortstop in the AL, I mean, I gotta keep going with the World Series champ Corey Seager. I think Corey Seager could have had a chance to win shortstop Gold Glove for the AL, but that's just my opinion. But nonetheless, as the year went on, Volpe did pick it up big time. Like he was making spectacular diving plays, this and that, flipping it with his bare hands and whatever. But I wouldn't call it a snub for Seager, in my opinion. I think Volpe deserved it as well. But if I had to replace one of the positions with someone else, I would say Seager for Volpe.
Interesting. I saw exactly what you were talking about in those first couple of games. I remember there was a game where he kind of booted the ball and a run came in to score. But after the game, he said, like, that loss was definitely on me. That's my fault. So I like the approach of, saying like this is definitely my fault still. But you like to see the bounce back from him. I think if it wasn't for his glove, as much as I love the 20 home runs and 25 stolen bases, something like that. Yeah. I think if it wasn't for his glove, he wouldn't have been in the lineup as much as he was this year, because he did struggle at the plate. And I think that's what they were looking for more of, him to be great at the plate, but you'll love to see the glove. Anthony, anyone on this list that surprises you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Volpe surprises me for one reason only, is that he's a New York Yankee, and I think that the Major League Baseball wants to promote him, especially given not that I'm not going to say his year disappointing, but especially, as you said, offensively, he was expected to do a ton more. I mean, this guy was supposed to be hitting about 300, and he was barely batting 200. But just like hearing a name, like I always like kind of hearing the Gold Glove names, because like a guy like Steven Kwan, you never really hear much about during the season. But when Gold Glove season comes around, he gets his due, and I like that. So it's not like a snub or anything, but I kind of like hearing names like that. But yeah, I would agree. If you're gonna pick one out in the AL and say like maybe a guy didn't deserve that, it's Volpe. I think if Volpe plays for the Minnesota Twins, Volpe's not getting the award. I think it's partially Major League Baseball says this guy's playing in New York. We want ratings to go up. We want this guy to be the next Jeter in terms of celebrity and all that. And this only helps him. So I think that's definitely a big part of why you got it.
I like that.
There's one more thing that I picked up as well. I actually kind of believe this is a snub when I say this, and I'm not being biased when I say it. But I think instead of Kevin Kiermaier, I think Brandon Nimmo should have had a chance to win Gold Glove this season. I'm just going to put it out there. Oh, sorry. Well, I don't even know what I was thinking. That's my mistake. I don't know why I was thinking AL for Brandon Nimmo, but we'll get to that afterwards. That's my mistake.
You got to be going after Brenton Doyle.
Brenton Doyle, yes. We'll get to him in a little bit.
Well, we'll get to him right now. I mean, the only guy that it wasn't a surprise to me, because he's always had the glove, is Kevin Kiermaier for me. Not as much I think that he didn't deserve it, but it's good to see him still on the list, which I love to see. Him and Matt Chapman have always been, amazing gloves, and any team that has him has a defensive specialist in center field or at third base. But looking at the NL now, I mean, there's some shockers here. Gabriel Moreno beats out JT Realmuto, which I agree with in some stances, which is fine. Zach Wheeler wins for the Phillies. Saw more Diamondbacks and Christian Walker. And that was it. But the one guy that surprised me, that I don't want to say he doesn't deserve it or anything, but it's Fernando Tatis Jr. I remember in the start of the season, they said they're going to move him to right field because he struggled at short with some plays that looked really easy. But you put him in right field, and if he's winning out there, that's what you want to see him do, which you like to see. You hope that maybe next year the glove helps a little bit more than just a Gold Glove. Maybe you can get him to the playoffs again. We'll see. And also, a big note is Ke'Bryan Hayes is the first player to beat out Nolan Arenado for the Gold Glove. Nolan Arenado didn't even get the consideration this year to be a nominee, but Ke'Bryan Hayes is the first player in this long Nolan Arenado span that we've seen, which I think was about 13 years. And he's the first player to beat it. And he deserves it so much. He is a great third baseman. He has probably the next Matt Chapman, but for the Pirates. But who surprised you guys again here?
Well, I'll give you a Mets snub, Justin, that you didn't bring up. Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I look, I'm very critical of Francisco Lindor for a few reasons. I mean, I think he's not the major problem with the Mets, but one of the things that he's very good at is defense. He's never really, when he gets an error, it's pretty shocking, put it that way. And all the defensive metrics, he's near the top of the list. And I don't know, for Dansby Swanson to beat him out, Dansby Swanson's fine at shortstop. But if I tell you, if I told you a week ago, tell me about Dansby Swanson's defensive ability at shortstop, you'd be like, oh, he's good. But you wouldn't tell me he's a gold glover. Meanwhile, if I mention Francisco Lindor, you'd agree with me that, the guy's a gold glover. So I look at that as a big snub. And I think if you're going to give Volpe, I know it's different leagues, but if you're going to give Volpe in the AL and the New York nod when he did nowhere near as good of a good job at shortstop than Lindor, and Lindor's the veteran, I don't know. It doesn't. I could see your Nimmo point, but I think the much bigger snub is a Lindor.
Yeah, just getting into that. Obviously, instead of Brenton Doyle, I would have went with Brandon Nimmo. I mean, listen, everyone knows between the three of us here, I'm a Mets fan. I'm going to ride or die with them no matter what. But when I say that Brandon Nimmo deserved this award this year, I truly mean it. Like, this guy would make so many plays at the wall. I mean, the way he tracks the ball is just unbelievable as well, because like he just knows exactly where it's going to be, and he's very cool, calm, and collected whenever he makes the play. You never have to hold your breath with a guy in center field like him. But just in general, I mean, Nemo's just been great all year. Like, he played in the majority of the games. Brenton Doyle did not play nearly as much as Brandon Nimmo did, for either side, if I'm not mistaken. But I feel like the Mets deserve some kind of recognition this year, even though it was a stressful and a hard year for the team. But I feel like somebody should have just been nominated and won the award for any kind of award that was put out there. So that's my take on that.
I I would agree about the games part. Brandon Nimmo played 152 this year. Brandon Doyle only played 126. I don't really. I think we can all say if we're gonna put on a baseball game, it's probably not going to include the Colorado Rockies. It's just part of how it is nowadays. So I didn't really get to see Brenton Doyle's skill out there, and that's definitely my fault, and that's just how it is. But you can definitely see how Nimmo could have been the winner of this for sure. I as a Phillies fan, I can agree with two Mets fans right now. We also saw Ha-Sung Kim, who is the first, I believe it is South Asian player to win a Gold Glove award. I just saw it. It's somewhere here, and I will figure it out eventually, I swear. Besides that, I think this is kind of clear. I think the next move, the one thing that I kind of was interested in is Ian Happ. I don't really. He's always been. He's a good glove, but I think he should have been traded. He shouldn't be a Cub for this Gold Glove. He should have been traded. But anyways, let's talk about some big news now. We talked about Gold Gloves. Silver Sluggers come out soon. I don't know when, but they do come out soon. And then awards such as MVP and Cy Young come out shortly after that, which is exciting. But yeah, so let's just jump into some more news. So, all right. I know I'm going to botch this name, and I'm very sorry, but I guarantee you by April of next year, I will have it down flat. All right. Yoshinobu Yamato is officially coming to the MLB. We've seen him. If you've been watching MLB social media, you've seen this guy everywhere. Who was it? Steinbrenner went to go see him pitch, and I think he threw like a perfect game or something. But he's a 25-year-old star. He is in with both New York teams right now, the Mets included. I mean, what do you guys think about this? Especially getting Kota Senga last year and now potentially getting Yamato. But either way, the league is getting Yamato no matter what. It's just it just depends on who.
Go ahead, Justin. I can see you're chomping at the bit. Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, as we all know, the Mets do have the richest owner in baseball in Steve Cohen. So I don't think money is the issue here. So obviously the Mets are going to be in the running with whether it's any kind of superstar talent that's out there in free agency. But as you mentioned, obviously we have Kodai Senga already. They have a very good relationship between him and Yamamoto. So I could definitely see that as a sign of encouragement for Mets fans, and possibly getting this guy inked up. But yeah, just in general, I mean, money's never going to be an issue. Um, yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more I have to say about that. But other than the fact that once this guy comes to the league, wherever he goes, he's going to be the next generational talent, and he's only 25 years old, so he still has a whole career ahead of him.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go as far to say as that because we have no way to know, and it's always
Yeah.
kind of a crapshoot with all these guys that come out of Japanese leagues or whatever league and never obviously play Major League Baseball. But yeah, I agree with you. They got to get him mainly because of the fact that we have no rotation right now. I mean, you go down the line, who do we have? Jose Quintana, you got Kodai Senga, and really the guarantees end there. I mean, the rest of them I can name are kind of utility guys that are in and out of AAA. So it's not there's nothing on paper that you have. You gotta go with that. And not that you mentioned 25 years old. There's nobody you're going to find in the open market that's 25 years old that has the talent he has. So it could very well be nothing, and he could be a disaster of a contract. I mean, it's no guaranteed whatsoever. But he's got all the talent in the world. I mean, I put the John Heyman tweet on our script that we made. 9 innings, 1 earned run, 14 strikeouts, no walks, 138 pitches. In Game 6 of their like Japan World Series that they have, forcing a Game 7. So obviously he's not gonna be throwing that many pitches here, but I would hope he would because he's capable, but he's probably not. But it's worth a shot, and with the richest owner in baseball, you got to spend the money.
And
The
not to
only
mention, like, okay, go ahead.
The only thing I'll say is whichever team he goes to, I would not be surprised if it's not an instant impact if it takes him a year or two to get fully adjusted. We saw it a little bit with Shohei, not too much. I mean, he's Shohei Ohtani, so you don't really see it from him. But not to say anything against leagues in Korea and Japan and China and different baseball leagues around the world now. But it's a different game. I mean, Major League Baseball is the baseball place to be. Yeah, Yamato is great, but he's also going up against players that, probably don't hit 60 home runs in like against pitchers like Max Scherzer and all these guys and in their prime. So I would be a little shocked if he does great the first year. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time.
And again, just not to mention, like, going back to the age factor and relating it to the Mets. The Mets have had a history of going out, of course, and signing like older veteran players. Of course, we had Verlander and Scherzer at one point. But again, him being 25 years old, this is a good gamble if you're Steve Cohen and the Mets, because this guy could turn out to be something really special for this team, and he's young and up and coming as well. So, I mean, I just don't see how the Mets really mess this thing up and lose this guy, especially having, of course, Senga already on the roster.
Well, I could see how the Mets can mess this thing up. They always mess them up. But I look at it like either you're going to get Ohtani or you're going to get Yamamoto. I'd be very shocked if Cohen got both, even with his checkbook, because that's an astronomical amount. But you got to get one or the other, because Yamamoto is going to come with a lot of money. He's going to get, I would say, something in the 100 million range, 150 million. For a guy that's never played a game in the big leagues. But he's going to have a huge contract. He's 25. He's probably going to have 4, 5, 6-year deal. So I don't know. To me, there's no excuse not to do it. And if you don't do it, then you better get Ohtani, or you better get a Soto and sign a Soto. You better do something, because Steve Cohen came here with this checkbook, and that's not the only way to win. As we've seen, the Mets have fallen apart with a huge, huge salary. But it's a big way to win, especially with a team that is as bare bones as it is right now with the Mets. There's a lot of open spots, and Yamamoto really helped fill a spot. So, yeah, I really don't see any avenue where they don't either get Yamamoto. They got to make a splash, put it plain and simple. And if Yamamoto is that splash, I'm fine with it.
That's interesting. Interesting. So moving from, I guess, Queens to South Florida now. Former GM of the Rays, Peter Bentix, is now president of baseball operations with the Marlins. We saw this with Kim Yang, who was phenomenal at her job. The Marlins let her go, and they pick up Bendix. I don't really know much about Bendix, so we'll have to see how he does. But we saw how good Kamang is, and she was incredible. She really put together a great team that made it to the playoffs. And I don't think anyone 2 years ago thought the Marlins will be in the playoffs even 2 years from now.
Yeah, it's like you. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Peter Bendix, but I can only go based off of the Rays, what the Rays did under his tenure, and they played well. He was working obviously on a shoestring budget, but you got to have somebody in there that knows young talent. And I've already said it a billion times, but Kim Ang knew that. I still don't understand why they let go over, but not to say that this guy is an idiot or anything. He seems like a very smart guy, and he seems like he did a lot of good work at the Rays. So yeah, all I can say is, as a Mets fan, I'm glad Kim Ng isn't, at least right now, a part of any organization in our division. I don't want her anywhere near our division because she's very smart, and I don't, she was part of the Yankees' rise. I don't want anything to do with that. So, I'm fine with Peter Bendix being there. Maybe he turns out to be a great president of baseball ops. I don't know. We'll see, but I'm just glad Kim Ng's out of it because I don't want her creating a Marlins dynasty.
Yeah, I'm not
That's
really sure exactly why they let her go too. It's a great question. Like, obviously, the success of the Marlins this past season was just unlike any other. They came from the bottom and put out a great show this whole season, especially when Sandy Alcantara did not have his best stuff. The success of the Marlins was going to run through this guy, and he did not perform well after winning the Cy Young the previous season. But nonetheless, all the other role players, that contributed to this team's success this season was built around Kim Yang. And again, yeah, I don't understand why they let her go, especially to your point, Anthony, that she knew the younger talent, and that's exactly what the Marlins are built around.
Yeah. I mean, is there any final thoughts on this? We talked about it a little bit earlier when we found out that Kamang wasn't going to be hired and in fact being fired. But yeah. To move on to the next point, the Reds in another sad news, the Reds declined Joey Votto's option for the 2024 season. He's now a free agent. But I think if I was Joey Votto, I know he loves the game of baseball. I know he loves it so much, but it would be so nice to see him ended as a Red. That's it. Just go and rest his case and just retire here. In 17 seasons with the Reds, he had 6 All-Star appearances, the 2011 Gold Glove, 2010 Hank Aaron Award, 2010 MVP. He had a 294 batting average, 2,135 hits, 356 home runs, and over 1,100 RBIs.
Yeah,
that's a good career.
He should leave it at that. He should leave it at. I don't want, like, I always see, like, sometimes on Twitter it'll go viral, a player that played for a team that you're like, what? How'd they play for that team? And like they always show like Dwight Gooden on the Rays or the Astros, or like it's always really stupid because these guys don't need to be with these teams that they're at the end of their career. And it's just going to be like that with Joey Votto. Joey Votto goes and signs with the Twins or something. 10 years from now, there's going to be that picture. Remember when Joey Votto was a Twin? Like, that's all it's going to be. He's not going to be anything. He's never going to be what he was. He's old. He's done. He's had a great career. He should call it quits. And I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't already. I think he's built for a media role, especially obviously with the Reds network. It would be perfect. He'd get a big deal and he'd be living comfortable. But yeah, I really can't see him going and signing elsewhere. And if he goes and does a minor league deal or something, it'll be sad.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, nobody can say that Joey Votto did not have a great career. I mean, he was just the heart and soul of the Cincinnati Reds team for 16 seasons. And, obviously they didn't get to that ultimate goal of winning a World Series, unfortunately. But, nonetheless, he built himself up, and he started with Cincinnati, never left the team, and again, yeah, it just wouldn't be right to see him sign like a 1 year deal and be like a bench player for any other team. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for him. But yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say about that. Votto was just a great player, and I hope he enjoys a possible retirement if he decides to not go anywhere. But we'll have to see what his decision is by the time the 2024 season comes around.
Yeah, and there was this, I don't want to say argument, but there was this clip of not Chris Rose, Mad Dog Russo, who, I mean, you see him everywhere saying like some ridiculous things. But he said that Zach Greinke and Joey Votto are both in the Hall of Very Good when they retire. Zach Greinke hasn't retired yet, so I think we'll talk about him later. But for Joey Votto, if this is his final game, if we never see him on a baseball field again, is he in the Hall?
I'll let you go first, Justin.
I think he's a Hall of Fame caliber player, in my eyes. I wouldn't say if he's first ballot or not, but I definitely feel like he should be in that discussion to make the Hall of Fame. I mean, you look at his career numbers, of course, batting just under 300. Of course, you mentioned the RBIs and the home runs. I mean, those numbers speak for themselves, but just the fact that like he went through so many tough times with Cincinnati where they didn't have great seasons. Every couple of years or so they would pick it back up and kind of get in the running to be to make the playoffs and all that stuff. But that was all led by Joey Votto. And as a whole, Joey Votto did not have a great supporting cast around him for most of his careers. I mean, he was really the main focus of the Cincinnati Reds team, throughout the majority of his career. But I mean, other than that, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. I feel like he should get a chance to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I would agree on that. We might have even talked about this a few shows ago. I forget, but yeah, but I think I said like in one of those eras ballots 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I still stand by that, even having the stats right in front of me. If you're gonna have, and I probably made the same point, but if you're gonna have Scott Rowland in there, you're gonna have Joey Votto in there.
Good point.
But yeah, not first ballot at all. If it's first ballot, it's kind of a joke, to be honest with you, because he had a very impressive career. But first ballot Hall of Famer is a guy like a Ken Griffey Jr., a guy like what Ohtani is projected to be right now. It's not Joey Votto. Joey Votto is very, very good, but he's not the Hall of Very Good. Maybe it was the Hall of Very Good 10, 15 years ago, but the Hall of Fame has expanded itself now, and there's no going back on that. Scott Rowland's a Hall of Famer, and he's a Hall of Famer. And there's a lot of other guys like Scott Rowland that have come in there in the past 5, 10 years. So if you're going to have them in there, you can't have a legend like Joey Votto in there. You can't keep a legend like Joey Votto out. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, very good player. He should be very proud of his career, but he shouldn't taint it anymore. I know I'm making that point ad nauseum, but just because all he's going to do is lower his numbers. And then maybe you get to a point where you're not going to be a Hall of Famer anymore, which would be just stupid.
I agree. Yeah, it's over for him. He had a great career. I think he's a Hall of Famer because of Scott Rowland, and that's really it. If you listen to the show consistently, we talk about three things a lot. We always go back to them. We always go back to 2021 Giants for being frauds, 2020 season for being fake, and Scott Rowland for being in the Hall. It is usually the three things that we always go to if we're trying to prove something. And once again, we go to it because it's true. It's true. And Scott Rowland actually played with Joey Votto.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yes. Yeah, they did because they were for a little bit, but not too long. Anyways, we now have some manager move. Well, first I want to go over the big trade. Not that it was big or anything, but the Tigers get Mark Canha for Blake Hobel, who's a double-A reliever. It's a good trade for the Tigers. They're trying to rebuild. They tried to do it earlier, like 2-3 years ago when they signed Javi Baez, which I know we didn't have the show back then, but in my eyes, I thought was going to be an awful trade to begin with, and it was awful to end with. 8 years, and he's locked in. I mean, it feels like the end of Miguel's Cabrera's contract, but instead of just having to deal with those last 8 years and getting to deal with some really great years, you only have to deal with 8 awful years from Javi Baez. I think Mark Canha is, in my eyes, this is what I was thinking. In my eyes, Mark Canha on this team is the Brent Rooker on the A's.
Yeah, that's fair.
You said comparison.
I would say if I'm Mark Canha, I'd be pretty pissed because I'd want to be in a contender. But I mean, as long as this Blake Hall guy doesn't turn out to be anything, which you never know. He's a reliever, so he could blossom late. But as long as he doesn't turn out to be anything, yeah, that's fine. I think it's a good veteran presence to have around the clubhouse, especially with all the young kids in that system. But outside of that, I really don't think it's going to be. He's 34 years old, and the Tigers are a few years away. So I don't see it having much of an impact. But, if honestly, though, if Mark Canha really wants to win the World Series, he might try to push his way out of there because, he's only probably got a few years left. And, I don't know. If I were him, I really wouldn't want to be there.
Yeah, I agree. Tigers do have a little bit of a nice future, though. It looks like Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson has been showing off really well. I think what they still need, though, is pitching. They have Skubal right now, and they have Mize, but Mize is injured, and Skubal is usually injured. So they need just someone good over there. My brother is a huge Tigers fan, which is another thing that I always mention. So I can see how the rebuild is working. It's very slow over there. Very slow over there. But it's still coming together, and I don't think Mark Canha is going to be a part of this rebuild, but he's something. So yeah. But going back to your Mets now, or Justin, did you have something to say?
Oh no, that's all good. We can move on to the Mets.
Well, yeah, let's move on to the Mets. First of all, it seemed we're going to talk about this guy a little bit later, but I got a notice earlier in the day that Craig Counsell was either going to be the Brewers manager next season or the Mets manager next season by the end of the day. Neither of those two happened. We'll get into that a little bit later. I've heard a bunch of candidates for the Mets. I've never heard Carlos Mendoza.
Well, he did emerge as he was immediately the biggest candidate besides Counsell. There was talks of other guys, but he was kind of the one that was said he's impressing. I'll give my thoughts and then I'll let Justin rant because I know Justin's got a lot of thoughts on it. But Mets fans are freaking out right now. I'm really not one of them, to be honest with you. Surprisingly enough, I usually am, because for one main reason, the guy's never managed. So I'm not gonna knock him or I'm not gonna praise him. And for another reason, that he's been in New York now for 14 years. Since 2009, he's been in the Yankees organization. And for everybody crying for Carlos Beltran, yet using that same argument about, well, he's Mendoza's never managed before. Well, neither is Carlos Beltran. And he's not managed, correct me if I'm wrong, a game outside maybe like a WBC game where he coached or something. So I'm not going to sit here. I really don't have any opinion on it, to be honest with you. I really think that the main manager on this team is David Stearns. Steve Cohen's given him every major control point of this team, and it's obvious about that. I think all that matters is Mendoza isn't totally incompetent with the bullpen, which, again, we don't know, and also knows how to keep the locker room together, which, again, we don't know. So I'm not pissed about it. I'm not really happy about it. I never thought Craig Counsell was that impressive of a candidate, to be honest. I think people have treated him as the next coming of Gil Hodges or something, and he's not. He's a fine manager. He had some success, but really, what has he done that was all that impressive? So I'll wait and see. I could either be a big fan or not be a big fan, but I don't think the first time manager rhetoric is that bad. I think it's just unknown right now.
Yeah. I just look like listen. I don't know too much again about Carlos Mendoza as well. I mean, obviously I read a little bit about him after the news broke, but again, I mean, I'm gonna go back to your point. You said that Mendoza never managed before. He's never had any experience like that. And I think right there, that's a problem within itself for the Mets because, you have a team right now that's built to win. They're spending so much money on all these guys and they're trying to build. They're not rebuilding at all whatsoever. And I just feel like the Mets should have went out and got somebody with some kind of experience like that. And one guy that I've always thought about. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't know if he was going to come back and manage again, but I think a guy like Joe Girardi would have been something to consider as well. I mean, I'm not listen. I see your face, Anthony, but like I'm not saying that's someone the Mets should have went after and possibly give him the job to, but just something like that would have I think that's the direction the Mets should have gone in. Trying to find somebody with some kind of experience postseason wise or just managing wise in general. But I mean, we'll have to wait and see what this guy does. Of course, we've said that this guy Mendoza has been beloved within New York. I mean, if he was loved with the Yankees, I mean, how it couldn't have been that bad because Yankee fans are really harsh. But if he was loved there, I mean, this could be something good for the Mets, but it could also be a major downfall. I mean, you don't know what to expect from this guy because we're going to see him on opening day managing for the first time. But as a Mets fan, I'm hopeful. I'm wishing them the best. Obviously, I want to see them succeed, but I just really don't know how to feel about this guy.
This kind of reminds me of when the Phillies hired Gabe Kapler, who also just got fired this year.
God, no.
It was his first time managing, and I had no idea what he did, whatsoever. I looked up his name once he got hired. And it was he's a very motivational guy, and I was like, all right, so that's gonna win us games, I guess. But some more hiring news. This one's kind of the least exciting of the bunch. Well, it's still exciting. It's just kind of sad again. Terry Francona, who retired last year, he had some physical problems with his health and everything, but he was just getting on the older end. But he's been Cleveland's manager for the longest time now. Stephen Vogt will take his spot now, who's a former catcher. He actually never played for Cleveland, but he has played for the A's, a bunch of other teams out there. His name has always been passed around. He's kind of been one of those guys that have always been put in a trade or two. And his probably most famous moment is his last hit when his kids announced him, and then he hit a home run on the first pitch. The only thing I have to say about this is that it's going to be a struggle for him. It is going to be a struggle for him. It is a system that Terry Francona has built for the longest time. And to say that Stephen Vogt can do what he did in his first season is, I don't think so. I think he's going to struggle a little bit. And for a team that made it to the playoffs last year, but didn't make it this year, and is a very young team, he's got time to work with it, so he'll be okay. But I wouldn't be surprised if, no offense to Vogt, but if this manager job only goes for a couple of years.
I think if you're going to use the inexperience, I think this is definitely the area to use it, because mainly the Guardians are a young team, and as are the Mets. So I mean, but the Guardians are really a team, as you said, that have been used to the Terry Francona system and are used to, put it this way, are used to the manager position not being a problem. Are used to the manager position. It's like, I don't want to equate it to Bill Belichick because it's not the same thing, but it's the same point of what I'm saying is that you just don't think about it. He's there, and that's it. And this is the first time the Guardians have had a new manager in what it's been, 15 years. It's been a really long time. So I don't know. I think you're talking about a guy that only retired after the 2022 season. He's a young guy. He's not even 40 years old yet. It's going to be interesting to see. I was very surprised when I saw this. I hadn't heard his name in any managerial running. But it could be very good. Sometimes guys come in there, I always use this example, and I used it with Justin when I was texting with him earlier about the Mendoza. The playoffs this season were largely first-time managers. Sure that a lot of them had been there for 6-7 years, Lavolo being one of them, but a lot of them were first-time managers. Now, obviously, Bochy won it, and he's the veteran. But having the first-time manager isn't a death sentence anymore, like it kind of used to be, where, oh, no, the first-time manager. So I'm not going to say this is a total negative either. I mean, it's also just an unknown. Am I a little bit more weary about Vogt than Mendoza? Yes, because he has way less experience managing, obviously. But yeah, it's just another unknown. Managers kind of just got to wait and see.
Yeah, again, I was really surprised when I looked, and I saw that he was hired. That was just a name that I never would have really even thought was up for consideration to become a manager, right now. I'm not saying this, Vogt could have become a manager further down the line. But right now, after just recently retiring, I mean, I found that to be a little bit different, but again, it just shows that the Guardians are going in a completely different direction. Francona had a system that he built from bottom to top all by himself, and now you're bringing in a whole new voice that's completely different from Francona's. And I mean, I don't really know how to feel about this. Like, are the Guardians going to try to compete this season under this guy, or do you think that this could be like a little bit of a fallback for them? But we'll have to wait and see, because like it's going to be really interesting, for sure. But yeah, that's all I really have to say.
I will say this: if there is any team that should have gotten, say, a Council or a Joe Madden or Girardi that you brought up, I think it would be the Guardians, because the Guardians are a team that I put it differently than the Mets, because the Guardians are, like I said, they're a team that are used to having the manager there. And I think, I mean, this is my opinion. I think Terry Francona had a lot more say in what like the veteran managers like a Bruce Bochy, Terry Francona. I think they give a little bit more say. And the Mets, Buck never really had that say. Obviously, Rojas never did. So I think it's just kind of a different situation. And if you were going to bring in a manager, I think it should have been somebody that's got that experience winning. But yeah, for all we know, Stephen Vogt could be the next great manager. So we just don't know. I just, if I was a Guardians fan, I would want more of an experienced guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that too. But a young team, so we'll see. This last one, and this will be our last news of the day, sadly, but Craig Counsell is going to Chicago from Milwaukee to manage, and Dave Ross was fired. I know the Cubs had kind of a disappointing end to their season, but I don't know why. I couldn't tell you. He got a 4-year, $40 million deal, which I saw this is more than what Ozzie Albies, the second baseman for the Braves, is being paid. When the Cubs go to Milwaukee, you are going to hear the biggest boos I have ever heard. Craig Counsell, I'm not saying that he betrayed the team, but it is a little bit betrayal.
This just showed me that he had no interest of leaving that area. The Cubs stadium is like 2 hours from Milwaukee, so it's the same kind of area. So I think he really, his goal, I think this whole time has been just to be the highest paid manager, which he succeeded. So good for him. I think it was just more of running up the price than anything. I think he used the Mets. If he was talking to the Guardians, he used the Guardians, whoever else he was talking to. I certainly didn't see it coming, but after it happened, I thought about it. I was just like, you know what? Kind of makes sense. I never thought that the Cubs were all that married to David Ross. He didn't do a terrible job, but they didn't win with him. So I think that and he was also, talk about first time manager. He was a first time manager. He's only a few years prior removed from playing when he first coached there. So I don't know. I really look at that whole situation. I do not believe for one second that Craig Counsell was remotely serious about going to the East Coast or moving anywhere really outside of the Milwaukee area. It's where his kids are. It's been everywhere that he wants to be there. So yeah, it's not that shocking, even though the team he went to was kind of surprising.
Yeah, I can. Well, I think I speak for the three of us here, and I would say that Craig Counsell was never going to come to the Mets to begin with. Like, as you mentioned, and I agree with your point, Anthony, that Counsell was using the Mets to really run up his price because he did want to become the highest paid manager out there. But looking at the facts that he went to Chicago, if I'm a Milwaukee fan, I could see this as betrayal as well. Like, especially given the fact that the Cubs and the Brewers are in the same division. And yeah, you said that they're pretty close to each other as well, distance wise between Chicago and Milwaukee. But yeah, I just think Counsell was never going to become the Mets manager when all the reports were saying that he was the likely favorite to become the manager. And then again, I saw reports from Passan and others that there was a chance that Counsell would go back to Milwaukee if they gave him the right price. But I don't believe that as well. I think Council was ready to move on. He was with Milwaukee for a long time. He played for Milwaukee when he played. So I think in the end he really wanted to just move on, go in a different direction. And as you said, Vin, there's gonna be a lot of booze when he goes back to Milwaukee for sure. So I'm excited to see that first matchup when the new season comes around.
Yeah, I know we all are, and I'll tell you one thing: I can't wait for the new season to come around right now. I wish it was tomorrow, the opening day. Uh, but this sadly comes to the conclusion of the walk-off for another week, and sadly, the conclusion for the baseball part of the walk-off is now off-season walk-off. Which, I mean, this is where Anthony and I started, so we'll have a fun time. But we're ready to keep going and keep on bringing you the news. And we will be bringing some football news too. Because as much as we love baseball, there are a bunch of other sports out there that play during the offseason. But don't go anywhere and come back next week for the walk-off. Thank you.